Joining us now, Congressman Walter Jones. Good to have you with us.
Well, John, thank you. I enjoy listening about Virginia politics very much. So anyway.
Every vote matters, Congressman, right? One vote determined control of the House of Delegates in Virginia. One vote. Can you imagine that?
Well, you can't get any closer than that. That's for sure. But
okay, now let's go right to the tax cut. Obviously, I'm excited about it. We're not on the same page on it. But why are you a Debbie Downer?
Well, John, I'm going to repeat myself 100 times. In 2000, our debt of this country was $5.7 trillion. Today, it's well over $20.5 trillion. We're headed, I've checked with CBO when I would tell you this, not even factoring in the tax bill. In the year, 10 years from now, the way we're going, they're projecting we'll be at $30 trillion in debt. As soon as the GDP matches the debt, what we're going to be is the next Greece. I don't know if I'll be on this earth 10 years from now or not, but while I've got the ability to try to stop this country, one vote can't stop anything. I understand that. But I want to continue to speak out about the party I joined that always said we need to reduce the debt of this nation. We have not done it, and we're not doing it. I hope you're right. I heard your introduction about the tax bill. I hope you're right and I'm wrong. But I don't think I am wrong. I hope I am wrong. But what I'm reading and studying and seeing is that debt is going to continue to climb until we have a collapse.
What we're all hoping for is this tax cut takes hold, the economy grows, we're going to get another 2 or 3 trillion in revenues that come in. Obviously, that's going to take the debt down because, look, nobody has the will in the swamp here to cut anything, right? So the only way out of this thing is to grow. I mean, there's no other options. So I'm going to take a shot, roll the dice on growing the economy and getting 4.2% growth and getting our jobs back and expanding the tax pay-in base so that revenues expand and we can bring the debt down, because I don't want to stay with the status quo because that's not working. But it's going to pass today, and we can agree to disagree. You're going to find this interesting. Ready? Okay,
Yep.
So Congressman Walter Jones. So I had an opportunity to sit down on Monday afternoon with General McMaster, okay, the head of the National Security Council for the president. And I got to ask him a question. Let me tell you the question I asked him, and then I'm going to read you his answer, which they approved for me to say on the air today in our dialogue, all right? Although when I first met with him, it was on background, but they gave me the authority to recount this on the air specifically, sir, with you. So here was my question. I said, General McMaster, the president campaigned vigorously and unabashedly for getting out of Afghanistan. He prides himself on keeping his promises, as everyone knows. So I said, General, I have a two-part question. Number one, what happened to change his mind, right? Why did he change his mind?
Sure.
And the second thing is, now that you've drawn up 5,000 troops rather than draw down, as the president promised he would do in Afghanistan, can you outline to us, in putting another 5,000 troops there, what is the mission and what are the benchmarks of success?
Good.
You think that was a fair question?
Absolutely.
So here's what he said. He said, well, we have 65,000 troops now in Afghanistan, and then he made fun of the fact that he had fired all my leakers, which is true. I don't have any more leakers. He fired them all.
Yeah.
But he did make fun of that. But he said it was a 4-point mission. The first was they wanted to get political reform in the Afghan government. So I'm going to tell you what he told me, and then I want your response.
Sure.
He said they wanted to get political reform in the Afghan government. The second thing he said is under Obama, the troops in Afghanistan were hamstrung with all these crazy rules of engagement. And he said the second thing is they wanted to take a regional approach. And so this was part of a broader South Asia strategy. And he gave the example of how Pakistan, that the Obama administration played footsie with them and they're not cooperating with us. And so this was part of an overall strategy on Southeast Asia. And number three, he said they were going to allow the troops to fight the enemy and win, although he couldn't define win. And then the final thing he said is they wanted to influence internal political dynamics to forge a common vision where all Afghans could see how the U.S. was serving their interests. That was his answer.
Well, I would say this. We've been saying almost the same thing for 16 years, going on 17 years. That is another example of a failed policy with the hopes and the pipe dreams that we're going to change a world known as Afghanistan that has no interest in anything but fighting. The tribes are the power bases in Afghanistan, and I just don't think it's going to work. But the sad thing is, I wish he had told you, John, I'm the journal now, we're going to watch this for 3 years, and if we have not accomplished one of the three items I just mentioned to you, we're going to pull out. They never say that because they'll never pull out. You will be my age, and I'll be dead and gone, and we'll still be there, spending billions of dollars that we can't even account for, and a few Americans killed every now and then. That is a failed policy.
He said that the touch points of success were based on the number of Afghan security casualties as a proportion to U.S. casualties. So he said, for instance, in the last 12 months, there were 6,700 Afghan security forces casualties, and I forget the U.S. number. If it was one, it was too many. But he said that's how you're seeing that it's different, that they're taking on more of the burden. But if you look at the first thing he said they wanted to influence political reform in the Afghan government. How the hell are they going to do that? People have been trying to do that for 3,000 years. Influence political reform in the Afghan government.
John, it's a dream that will never come true. It is a nightmare, actually. They have been paying the leaders of Afghanistan, going back to Karzai. If you remember, he was quoted in the New York Times as saying, I don't want to lose my money. They give me cash money. The CIA admitted they were giving Karzai bags of cash money, and I bet you they're doing the same thing with Gandhi now. It's just, we cannot admit that, not that we made a mistake, but the policy is not working, and reverse the policy. I just don't understand it. I mean, the country's in deep financial trouble, and we still continue to follow a policy that will never change.
And he said that they wanted to influence internal political dynamics so they could forge a common vision where all Afghanistans are served and they see the U.S. for the positive role they're playing. But we've been there 17 years, and the way they see us is as invaders and occupiers. I mean, what is going to change after 2 decades?
Well, that goes back to my frustration and your congressman's frustration, the fact we can't even have a policy debate on the floor of the House. And if we get back from Christmas, I am going to continue to be outspoken about the waste, fraud, and abuse and the history of Afghanistan. It is a graveyard of empires, and there is a headstone right now being made that says USA.
When I went back to how did he change the president's mind, he said that I should go back to the president's speech on it, that he had admitted that he didn't have all the facts, and when he got them all, he didn't think pulling out. He also said that if you were to pull out, which was the president's instinct, and he did admit that, he said you're going to create a vacuum like we did in Iraq, which then, ISIS came in and we had all that going on. And then he also said you have to remember, if you pull out, then, that might sound good, But what happens is then the Taliban takes over territory, and now we have the same thing we had in the 9/11 situation, where the enemy has bases and fields, and they have areas where they can train, and ISIS can come in, and the Caliphate can come in, and all that. And he said, so you're just basically putting off the inevitable, and you're giving them a foothold where they shouldn't have one. That was his other answer.
Well, I would say to the general, who I have respect for, I'm more concerned about jihadists in Central America than I am Afghanistan. Much more concerned than Afghanistan, which is 10,000 miles away.
Mm-hmm. Then the final question, I didn't ask him this, but one of my colleagues did, which I thought was classic. She said, well, General, you served in the last two administrations, and so what changed? You were driving this policy under Obama and Bush, so what changed? Where is General McMaster different? I thought that was a great question.
I do too.
I didn't get to ask the follow-up, but my colleague asked that, and he said that this might have been his most honest answer. He said that, President Trump and talking to him on a daily basis has really changed his outlook on a lot of things in that part of the world. So that, at least that was his answer. But I don't think we're getting an AUMF debate, because I think if they went to Congress with these four reasons, I think they'd lose. I don't think they'd get authorization. I don't think they could get the American people to buy into that. I think that's why they're blocking the debate, sir.
Well, John, I agree with you, and appreciate you sharing the story with McMaster. I'm just saying it's the same story they told us 15 years ago. And you're right. I don't believe that Mr. Ryan wants us to debate, because the American people would certainly be behind the vote to get us out of Afghanistan, because there's nothing that we can influence and change. All we can do is waste lives and money. So I appreciate you sharing that with your listeners as well as with me. Makes me more frustrated, I'll say that.
Well, we got to keep fighting, but I'm convinced what the whole experience convinced me of, Congressman Jones, is that on this AUMF thing, number one, you are 110% right. And the second thing the meeting with the general convinced me of is the leadership will continue to lie to you, and they will continue to block any AUMF debate, because if they allowed it to happen on the floor, there's enough people like me that would bring attention to it, and there's the argument to stay there would crumble, and the vote would fail, and then they'd be stuck getting out. I think that's the thing. They don't really want to tell the American people what's going on there. That's the issue. That's why they don't want to have the debate, because they can't win it. The tide will turn on the facts. And so I don't think you'll ever have it, but all we can do is keep asking, fighting, and telling people the truth, right? That's all we can do.
Well, we're going to keep the issue in front of the American people, because we're the only ones, a few of us in Congress and media like yourself, John, that can influence the American people by telling them the truth about Afghanistan.
All right. So for all of our listeners in the 3rd District, in North Carolina, along the coast, your representative, Walter Jones, great guy. Merry Christmas to you and him. And even though your congressman voted against it, you're going to get a tax cut for Christmas. We love you. Merry Christmas.